Title of the first section today is Review, Solving by Substitution. In this section, we'll solve two equations and we'll use substitution to solve. First two equations, y equals 3x minus 4, and second equation, y equals 2x plus 2. Again, to solve by substitution, we'll replace one of the variables and solve for the other variable. The second equation, if we have y equals 2x plus 2, since that is equal to y, we can replace or substitute that in for the other y. So rewriting the first equation, in place of y though, we'll substitute or replace 2x plus 2 and equals the other side, which is 3x minus 4. Now we have one equation with one variable that we can solve. To get x by itself, we move all the variables to one side. The opposite of positive 3x would be minus 3x on both sides. 2x minus 3x would be negative x or negative 1x. Plus 2 equals 3x's would cancel and we'll be left with negative 4. Solving for x, the opposite of adding 2 would be subtracting 2. So we'll have negative x equals negative 4 minus 2 would be negative 6. And to solve for x, if we have a negative x or negative 1x, to make it a positive number, we can divide by negative 1. So the negatives will cancel, and we'll get our answer x equals negative 6 divided by negative 1 would be positive 6. Keep in mind this is the first answer, x equals 6. To get our second answer, we can plug this into either of the first two equations to solve for y. If we take the first equation, which was y equals 3x minus 4, now we know x is 6. We can plug a 6 in for x and solve for y. 3 times x would be 3 times 6 minus 4. Y equals, multiplying first, 3 times 6 would be 18. 18 minus 4, and the answer would be 14. So we have two answers, x equals 6 and y equals 14. If you want to, you could write this as a single point, x comma y, which would be 6 comma 14. This point represents the solution, or where the graphs would cross if you graph the equations. Title of the last section today is More, Substitution, Questions. In this section, we'll continue to solve equations using substitution. First two equations, y equals x minus 2, and the second equation, 2x plus 2y equals 4. Solving by substitution. If you look at the second equation, this one we cannot substitute in for x or y because it's not solved for x or y. But the first equation, we have y equals x minus 2. If y is equal to x minus 2, that means we can replace that in for the y in the second equation. So rewriting the second equation, we'll have 2x plus 2y, but instead of y, we can put parentheses and we'll substitute in or replace it with x minus 2 and equals 4 from the equation. Solving from here, 2x would stay the same, plus 2 times the parentheses. If you remember, we'll use distributive property. multiplying each number, each term by 2. 2 times x would be 2x, and 2 times a negative 2 would be negative 4, equals 4. Combining like terms, 2x plus 2x would be 4x, minus 4 equals 4. Solving for x, we can add 4 to both sides, and we'll have 4x equals 4 plus 4 would be 8. And last step, to get our first answer, we can divide by 4. So our first answer, x equals 2. Again, keep in mind this is our first answer. This is one variable. We still need to figure out the second variable, which is y. Plugging it back in, you can use either equation. The easiest equation to use in this case will be the first one, since we already have y by itself. So y equals x minus 2. But again, instead of x, since we solved for x, we can plug a 2 in for x. And we'll have y equals 2 minus 2 would be 0. So our two answers, x equals 2, y equals 0. And again, when you have x and y, you can write that as a point. X is 2, y is 0, so the point would be 2, 0. Second question and last question for the section. First equation, 2x plus 3y equals 14. And the second equation, 4x plus 2y equals 12. Solving these two equations by substitution. At the beginning of the question, each equation is not solved for y, so we cannot substitute in at the beginning. But what we can do is take one of these equations and solve for either x or y. In this case, if we subtract 4x on both sides, we can start to solve for y to get y by itself. So 2y would come down. Putting x first, since we cannot combine it with 12, we'll have negative 4x plus 12. And again, solving for y to get y by itself, we can get rid of the 2 in front. It's multiplying by 2, so we can divide by 2. And we'll get an equation we can use for substitution, which would be y equals, dividing each number by 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 would be negative 2x, and 12 divided by 2 would be 6. So we have an equation that we can use for substitution, y equals negative 2x plus 6. When we substitute this, we'll take the negative 2x plus 6 and plug that into an equation to solve for y. When we plug it in, we want to use a different equation that we have not used yet. Since we use the second equation to solve, we'll take this number or this expression and plug it into the y for the first equation, which again is the equation we have not used yet. So rewriting the first equation, we'll have 2x plus 3y. But again, instead of y, we'll plug in negative 2x plus 6 and equals 14. Solving from here, the 2x would stay the same. And when we have a number outside the parentheses, we can use distributive property to simplify. 3 times a negative 2x would be negative or minus 6x. And 3 times 6 would be plus 18, equals 14. Again, continuing to solve, we can combine like terms. 2x minus 6x would be negative 4x, plus 18 equals 14. Solving from here, to get x by itself, we can get rid of the plus 18 by subtracting 18 on both sides. So we'll have negative 4x equals 14 minus 18 would be negative 4. And last step, we can divide by negative 4. And we'll get our first answer, x equals positive 1. Again, keep in mind this is one answer, x equals 1. We still need to plug it back in to solve for y. Solving for y, you can use any of the first two equations to solve. We can also use the equation that we simplified to use for substitution. If we use this equation, we'll have y equals negative 2x, but instead of x, we can replace that with 1 and plus 6. So y equals negative 2 times 1 would be negative 2 plus 6. Negative 2 plus 6 would be 4. So we'll have our second answer, y equals 4. And again, you could write this as a point, x comma y, which should be 1 comma 4. This point again represents these two equations would cross at 1 comma 4.